ThomasERicks, First Principles, What America's Founders Learned from the Greeks and Romans and How That Shaped Our Country. Dive into the fascinating world of America's founding fathers and discover how classical Greek and Roman principles played a significant role in shaping the United States as we know it. First Principles by ThomasERicks brings to light the influence of classical literature, philosophy, and ideas on the founders, their vision for the country, and their approach to governance. Throughout this summary, we will trace the evolution of America's adoption and eventual loosening of the classical perspective, from its integral position in building the nation to its decline in the face of progress and social change.
Virtue and America's Founding Fathers. To America's founding fathers, virtue meant public-mindedness instead of morality. They held the Roman Republic as a model for republican government, admiring figures like Cicero and valuing Romans more than Greeks. Although this admiration for classical principles guided them in building the nation, it also led to some flaws, such as the justification of slavery. Despite these imperfections, the Founding Fathers managed to establish a republic that continuously expands rights for its citizens. In the era of America's Founding Fathers, the concept of virtue embodied public-mindedness, the ability to prioritize the collective good over personal interests. This understanding of virtue, derived from Latin origins, deeply influenced those who built the United States, appearing over 6,000 times in Revolutionary-era writings, even more frequently than the word freedom. The founders looked to the ancient Roman Republic as an exemplary model of governance. Unlike today, where Greek works by Homer, Plato, and Herodotus dominate great books lists, Romans enjoyed a higher status than Greeks in the Revolutionary era. Revered for their wisdom and stability, the Romans, compared to their Greek counterparts, were seen as a key influence on America's fledgling nation. Modern perspectives on historical figures differ significantly from those held by the Founding Fathers. While Cicero may now be regarded as a pompous figure, the founders idealized him as a masterful orator and accomplished leader. The Roman Republic itself served as a guiding light, with Alexander Hamilton regarding its government as having achieved the utmost height of human greatness. Moreover, the founders were intrigued by the decline of Rome, seeking to understand the reasons behind its erosion. Nevertheless, the founders' admiration for their classical predecessors sometimes led to troublesome decisions, such as their stance on slavery. Many founders justified human bondage as a natural aspect of society, drawing on classical theories for support. Though the Founding Fathers were not perfect, their dedication to classical ideas and principles laid the foundation for a republic determined to expand rights and opportunities for an ever-growing population. This insight into their mindset offers valuable lessons for understanding the roots of governance in the United States. Washington's virtuous leadership. George Washington's favorite play, Cato, showcased the virtuous and disciplined qualities he sought for himself. Through his experiences in the French and Indian War, he learned important leadership lessons. The 22-year-old faced successes and crucial failures, such as General Edward Braddock's costly arrogance, which deeply impacted his approach as a future military general and statesman. Consequently, Washington succeeded as a leader who exemplified discipline, humility, and virtue. Cato, a popular pre-revolutionary American drama featuring lengthy speeches and memorable one-liners, was George Washington's all-time favorite. It depicted the life of a virtuous figure who was born into privilege but fought against corruption, qualities Washington tried to emulate. Unlike many founders of his time, Washington wasn't cultivated within a prestigious university. He gained knowledge and wisdom on the battlefield. Washington's introduction to combat occurred in 1754 during the French and Indian War, a battle between the British and French alongside their respective First Peoples allies. A young 22-year-old Washington led his regiment and won a battle against the French with few casualties. However, subsequent battles were not always so victorious. Eventually, French forces launched a counterstrike, resulting in heavy losses for Washington's troops. A year later, an even more ignominious defeat unfolded under British General Edward Braddock's command. Braddock's overconfidence led to the deaths of 1,200 British soldiers in the Ohio River Valley, ultimately teaching Washington a fatal lesson about arrogance. These experiences shaped Washington's character and prepared him for his future role as commander of the Continental Army. Having witnessed the perils of hubris, Washington led his forces with humility, discipline, and wisdom, following the Roman ideals of virtuous leadership. Despite his lack of formal education, his steadfastness and sincerity guided him in becoming a successful and respected leader. A revolutionary military genius. George Washington's military approach during the Revolutionary War transitioned from early failures to a successful strategy influenced by the Roman general Fabius. Washington's evolution as a leader demonstrated his commitment to public virtue and humility, ultimately choosing to resign and return to civilian life after victory. Washington, often regarded as a military genius, initially struggled to find an effective strategy against the mighty British Army during the Revolutionary War. His first attempt was to face the enemy head-on, but the British Army's wealth, training, and numbers made this approach futile. After a year and a half of defeat, Washington shifted to a war of post strategy following the advice of his trusted general, Nathanael Greene. Unfortunately, this defensive approach, which involved retreating into fortresses, also resulted in costly setbacks and troop surrenders. Realizing the need for a drastic change, Washington turned to a third strategy inspired by Roman general Fabius. Notorious for his slow thinking but cautious tactics, Fabius defeated Hannibal of Carthage by focusing on a war of attrition, denying the enemy a decisive victory. Mirroring this approach, Washington cut off the British Army's resources, impaired their supply lines, and forced them to maintain a constant guard. Though Fabius was known to have rarely won a battle, his war of attrition technique led to victory. Washington adopted this model successfully, ultimately overcoming the British forces by exhausting their resources and wearing them down. After the war, Washington displayed a profound commitment to public virtue when he chose to resign as commander of the Continental Army and return to civilian life, similar to Cincinnatus, who renounced his Roman dictatorship after leading his people to victory. This pivotal decision exemplified Washington's humility and respect for the principles he fought for during the American Revolution. American Cicero, John Adams. The Roman orator Cicero and the American founding father John Adams shared more than just their political ambition. Both men climbed the social ladder from humble beginnings, strove for greatness, and were sensitive to critique. Despite their vanity, they delivered inspiring speeches, took a strong stance against tyranny, and ultimately helped shape their respective nations. Cicero exposed the Catalan conspiracy to safeguard Rome's consulship, while Adams published essays and predictions that sparked revolutionary sentiments among fellow Bostonians, cementing his legacy as an American Cicero. Born in 106 BC, the Roman orator Cicero started life as an ordinary citizen, eventually achieving high office and nobility. What set him apart were his eloquent speeches, which reached their pinnacle when he thwarted the Catalan conspiracy, an attempt by Senator Catiline to overthrow Rome's consulship. Cicero's brave stance against tyranny, combined with his political prowess, made him an inspiration to America's founding fathers. None admired Cicero more than John Adams, who saw remarkable similarities between the Roman and himself. Just like his idol, Adams had risen from a humble background through hard work and a gift for persuasive speech. Both men aspired to be respected, powerful, and honorable political figures. Unfortunately, vanity was the shared Achilles heel for these two great men. Cicero loved adulation, while Adams had a hard time dealing with negative criticism. As president, Adams even went so far as to imprison newspaper editors who spoke ill of him. Even before his presidency, Adams played a crucial role in American politics. He was the first founding father to actively call for a revolution. In 1765, he penned a pamphlet envisioning a future America reigned by liberty and fueled by millions of citizens. He followed this up with a series of essays, suggesting that Americans were entitled to freedoms granted by God, not a king. Adams' influential writings spurred Bostonians to reckon with their rights and the fairness of their treatment at the hands of the British. They started to embrace the idea of a forthcoming revolution. It was this vision and courage that earned John Adams his fitting title as the American Cicero. Jefferson's Epicurean influence. Thomas Jefferson's unique qualities as a founding father stemmed from his Greek-inspired education and deep interest in Epicurean philosophy. This belief system laid the foundation for his vision of American happiness, influencing the drafting of the Declaration of Independence. Pursuing a life grounded in virtue and tranquility, rather than materialistic values, became the cornerstone of his work and, subsequently, the nation's future. Thomas Jefferson's multifaceted persona stood out among the founding fathers. Aesthetically inclined, he immersed himself in music, literature, and architecture. Although the Romantic movement had not emerged, one could consider Jefferson an early adopter. He embraced passion, emotion, and occasional irrationality. The ancient Greeks significantly impacted the Romantic movement and, undoubtedly, Thomas Jefferson. As a notable founding father, he exhibited a distinctly Greek influence, specifically drawn from the philosopher Epicurus. In his educational years, Jefferson maintained a commonplace book, recording quotations from his readings. Greek authors, such as Euripides, prominently appeared throughout his entries. Interestingly, Epicurus was absent, suggesting Jefferson crossed paths with the philosopher later in life. Once he discovered Epicurus, Jefferson's ideals were powerfully shaped. Epicurus, founder of a tranquil community called the Garden, believed that pleasure and peace were life's ultimate goals. Though often associated with hedonism today, Epicureanism held a deeper meaning for Jefferson. He understood it as seeking happiness through virtue, composed of prudence, temperance, fortitude, and justice. Jefferson's interpretation of Epicureanism was evident in his authorship of the Declaration of Independence. Replacing John Locke's words, life, liberty, and estate, with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Jefferson redefined American values, prioritizing individual well-being over private property. Furthermore, the Declaration underscored the importance of prudence and justice, two principles central to Epicurus' teachings. Ultimately, the foundation of America owes much to Epicureanism. Jefferson's vision, based on the tenets of this philosophy, set the stage for the nation's development, emphasizing the pursuit of happiness over materialistic desires. Madison's Enlightenment influence. In the 18th century, Scotland experienced an intellectual revolution called the Scottish Enlightenment, which greatly influenced the founding fathers of America, including James Madison. During his time at Princeton, Madison learned from Scottish professors who introduced him to French philosophers like Montesquieu. Madison's understanding of the classics was shaped by Enlightenment thinking, and he incorporated these ideas when writing the American Constitution and the Federalist Papers. Montesquieu's arguments discussing republic size and factionalism inspired Madison to create a large national republic with strong federal government to address these issues. During the 18th century, Scotland embarked on an intellectual revolution known as the Scottish Enlightenment. This movement emerged even as neighbouring England experienced a period of intellectual stagnation. Scotland's high literacy rate and flourishing universities in Edinburgh and Glasgow fueled this intellectual boom. A wave of Scottish immigrants entering America played a significant role in shaping the thoughts of the Founding Fathers, most notably that of James Madison, the fourth President of the United States. James Madison's exposure to Scottish Enlightenment thinkers at Princeton left a lasting impression on his intellectual development. Under the guidance of his Scottish professors, Madison studied French, classics, logic, and moral philosophy. This curriculum exposed him to the ideas of French philosopher Montesquieu, who emphasized the importance of checks and balances in government systems. Montesquieu's ideas, presented in his work The Spirit of the Laws, drew heavily from ancient Greek and Roman civilizations. He argued that republics could only thrive as small nations. Large ones would inevitably descend into factional conflicts that would ultimately tear them apart. This idea resonated with Madison, who referenced Montesquieu's arguments when drafting his two most significant works, the American Constitution and the Federalist Papers. The American Constitution provided the framework for the new nation, while the Federalist Papers gave it the necessary legitimacy. Madison addressed concerns about potential partisanship among American politicians by incorporating Montesquieu's concept of checks and balances into the structure of the government. He sought to create a system that would leverage partisanship as a feature rather than a flaw, allowing the three branches of government to keep each other in check. Contrary to Montesquieu's belief that a republic must remain small to function effectively, Madison envisioned a large national republic with a strong federal government. In his view, this setup would divide the nation into various communities and political parties, making it difficult for any one group to dominate. Furthermore, a robust federal government would maintain national unity during regional conflicts, ultimately proven crucial during the Civil War. By interpreting classical ideas through an Enlightenment lens, James Madison played a pivotal role in shaping the unique governmental structure and organization of the United States, ensuring its survival and stability in the face of factionalism and regional strife. The decline of American classicism. Coined as loyal opposition, today, the early United States had no political vocabulary for healthy political competition. America's founders relied on classical tenets to understand their new nation. However, as partisanship and different political ideals emerged, adherence to classical principles waned. The presidencies of Adams and his successors marked significant changes in political thought, paving the way for a more modern and inclusive approach to governance. Before the term loyal opposition entered modern political discourse, America's founders grappled with defining and implementing the concept of healthy political competition. Rooted in classical ideals, they often used Roman terms to describe their opponents. Federalists, primarily led by John Adams and Alexander Hamilton, labeled anti-federalists as Catalans or traitors to the state. But the views held by America's founders were too limited to capture the evolving dynamics of their burgeoning nation. The Federalists maintained that virtuous men were a necessity for successful governance. When George Washington, a paragon of virtue himself, held office, this view seemed justifiable. But it was quickly toppled by Adams' successor, Thomas Jefferson, a staunch anti-federalist champion. Jefferson's presidency substantially departed from the notion that virtue was tantamount to political success. During his tenure, Jefferson's inaugural address marked a clear victory for the anti-federalists. Nevertheless, he vowed not to infringe on the rights of the defeated opponents, asserting that regardless of differing opinions, everyone was entitled to the same rights. Jefferson's stance, devoid of any strong emphasis on virtue, shattered the long-held classical tenets that had defined America's political landscape. As Jefferson's presidency progressed and James Madison succeeded him, the influence of classical thinking dwindled. Societal preferences shifted, classicism became an object of derision, an emblem of elitism and upper-class buffoonery. Simultaneously, questions arose about the compatibility of slavery with the essential American value of freedom. By the 19th century, reason and rationality had given way to emotion. While classicism was not completely abandoned, it ceased to serve as a guiding force in the United States. Instead, the evolution of political thought during this era opened the door to a more inclusive and contemporary understanding of governance, setting a precedent for future generations of American leaders.
In conclusion, by understanding the relationship between America's founding fathers and ancient Greek and Roman ideals, we gain new insight into the foundations of the United States. From its position as an essential guiding light in the nation's establishment to its eventual decline as an ideological force, classicism played a pivotal, albeit complex, role in shaping America. We witness how the founders' understanding of virtue, personal character, and democratic principles evolved over time, and how their beliefs helped to define the burgeoning nation and its path forward. Although classicism's influence ultimately diminished as society and politics evolved, its lasting impacts remain central to the fabric of America's growth and development.